please. The second meeting of the City Council and the Economic Improvement Commission, call to order. Just after 4 o'clock, appreciate everyone being here today. I think the intent of the meeting is to get to know each other better and how the EIC and the city can work together on projects and the same initiatives. But to start off, I'd like to do introductions. Myself, I'll start here. Thad Olson, just elected as chair to the EIC last week. Very new. Been on the board, EIC board, for about a year, and I'm at Bremer Bank. Been there for 11 years.
I'm Anthony Hicks. Obviously, I'm on City Council and also the city representative on the EIC. I've been on the EIC board for, I think, whether it's 6 years, I think. And obviously, I manage the ethanol plant just outside of town, occasionally.
Rod Speedall, City Council, 4th Ward.
Kyle Richards, I've been on the Economic Improvement Commission for 5 days. And,
you ready to get something done?
Yeah, exactly.
Tired of the waiting around.
See you at Lake Region Healthcare.
Justin Arneson. I'm a City Council member from the 3rd Ward.
Scott Rachel, City Council member, 2nd Ward.
Yep, it is.
Yeah.
You live just a block away from me.
Andrew Bremseth, City Administrator and ex officio member of the EIC Board.
Jim Fish, City Council, 1st Ward.
Darren Appert, City Council, 1st Ward. Ben Shire, Mayor. Tom Roofer, City Council, 2nd Ward.
Carla Conley, I've been on the EIC board for about 4 or 5 months now, and I'm with M&R Sign.
Thank you. Amy, with that.
Great. Well, thanks everyone, and sorry that I do have my, some of you do have your back to me, but that's, I just not, I felt it was better than being way over there. So I'm going to start, yeah.
Can I ask who we might be missing? Because I don't know all the people on the board.
Sure. Missing from the EIC board, Ron Spangler, who has illness in the family, so wish she was here. Junior, Ron Spangler Jr. Otter Tail Power, and Mary Wolf, HR Director at Northern Contours, managing one of the other facilities outside of Fergus Falls, so unable to be here. And then as well Andrew Yagi from Glindy Nielsen, and he had a conflict with his parish board meeting tonight.
Thank you.
Great, so as Thad introduced, the goal today is to review kind of activities through 2017, highlight some of the priorities of the EIC that they established in 2017 and actions that we've been working on, ongoing projects and initiatives that are taking place, and then some data. But to start, just to remind everyone that the EIC is an independent commission that serves as the official economic development arm for the city of Fergus Falls. There is a services agreement between the city and the EIC to provide those services with the primary purpose of promoting development through retention, enhancement, and creation of business in the community. And that's something, that last bullet has been something that maybe does need to be talked about because of the change in the market today, that development has, the convergence of economic and community development has really been seen in the industry as merging and creating the quality of life, the sense of place, and the items that are necessary to support the workforce of today and tomorrow to then support those businesses. So there's been this convergence taking place over recent years. So as I mentioned, we'll be overviewing development highlights that have taken place in the community, just to remind us that we have had a lot of great projects start and complete both in 2017, ongoing projects, initiatives, the data, and then have discussion at the close. So from a development perspective, we certainly did have a number of closures and closure announcements take place in 2017, but there also was a lot of strong investment and reinvestment in the community. So shown here are a number of new builds that were permitted in 2017. So Smith & Sem moving to a standalone larger facility for their operations. Salon True, the same situation, tripling their size. Taco Bell doing a tear down rebuild and making Councilmember Roofer proud first customer there. But again, seeing that vacant building go into a new productive use is important. Wash and Go.
Region Healthcare.
It's on his side. That's sorry.
Anyway.
I disrupted the conversation.
You guys got it all out now?
Yeah. No more references to Taco Bell. Wash and Go Car Wash also was a tear down rebuild of a closed gas station. So a new active use now open at that property. And then the Little Chief Outpost was permitted, and that's the former Take 5 facility that had an explosion back in 2016. The structure did need to come down, and now is being rebuilt into a new facility there, and they'll wrapping up the Big Chief renovations so they can focus on getting the final details for that facility. Same ownership there.
Do you know when they're supposed to finish that up, just out of curiosity?
No, they haven't given us a date that I've heard.
Mid-April.
Okay.
Hey,
Oh, yeah.
neighbor would know there, yeah.
My neighbor, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nobody got a place to eat.
Yep. So that'll be
Tom.
a good addition to that side of town. So those are new builds that we saw take place. There are also a number of expansions, relocations, people going into existing buildings. Tisdale Chiropractic relocated to the former movie gallery, increasing their space, and also a really significant renovation. If you haven't stopped in, it's from being a movie shop to a chiropractic office was a pretty significant transformation internally, and certainly the new refreshed look on the external. And then also we'll have space for lease adjacent to that when he kind of gets situated as the chiropractic office, and has brought on another chiropractor, which was anticipated with that relocation. Sherwin-Williams, while we certainly liked them downtown, it was difficult for customers and limited their stock availability. So them moving out to the former KFC location and adding on a significant portion to that building will really help them serve their customers in a much better way. Thrivent Financial, Taylor Larson, he was renting space within another building downtown and has now purchased and expanded his office operations to a building that really transitioned from one user right to him, so didn't even see that one stay vacant for any period of time. And then Zip Trip did get their permit for the small expansion that will result in the addition of a Godfather's to Go and needed renovations to that facility as well. So excited to see some of those wrap up here this year. And then some new business openings. Fabled Farmer, another food offering downtown. Perks Coffee and Tea across the street on a really tiny, infill lot that would have been challenging for really much of any other use. Doherty Staffing Solutions opening a downtown office. H2M also opening a downtown office. And then OSPTI, an orthopedic sports physical therapy, is what that stands for. And they have locations in Breckenridge, Fargo, Hankinson, North Dakota, and now Fergus Falls. So they're off Tower Road by Premier Meats, if you haven't seen their new office. And then Great Clips did open this year as well. Industrial saw some additional growth with the completion of Aura Fabricators and their new 35,000 square foot building. That initially, when was talked about back in mid-2016, was thought to be a 20,000 square foot building. So they really, as they proceeded in their plans, realized they needed future space. And I was just out there for a tour last week, and it's full. It's already full, and so that's exciting to see the robotics that they've instituted in that facility, and the technology that they're using in response to the workforce challenges. They have hired 10 new people so far and expect to continue that hiring, so they're well within their projected hiring for their obligations related to the financing provided to them. But really an exciting operation to see underway and in person. Tag Up, a longstanding company, did add on with about a 50% expansion and renovation to their facility, brought a whole new facade to the area, to their building, and projecting really the cool stuff that they do inside their building as well. 59 Finishing snatched up a vacant industrial building, the former Go Float location that it had been vacated, and they are moving in from outside the city limits. They're in Buse Township, and significantly increasing their space to do their metal finishing work, and are still working on their relocation. They're not fully operational in that space, but really excited to be in that, and it will really allow them to better serve their customers both locally and throughout the region. And then just to mention, Thiele Technologies, if you've seen a different name or heard of a different name, they do have a different name now, and it's BW Integrated Systems, which says nothing. They are owned by Barry Waymiller, a large multinational corporation, and they had a restructuring which really resulted solely in a new name for our location here. Some other facilities did have some changes, but we did just do a visit out there, and they really in name only have they changed. So just wanted to mention that so folks know that there wasn't any impact or even a transaction of the company. There was no ownership change, just truly a renaming and organization of their different entities within the company. Certainly a number of other projects that we don't want to forget. The library expansion and renewal project, well underway, and look forward to seeing that completed in 2018. Country Inn and Suites rebranding that didn't have a flag for about a year time, and came in now with Country Inn and Suites and are completing a significant renovation of all the guest rooms, as well as common areas, and then the Bigwood Event Center space, as well as having different renovations and cosmetic updates completed as well. So there'll be a really nice fresh look and investment in that facility. Good Shepherd Church working on an expansion on the west side of town. Brown Home completed a number of pretty significant mechanical and small addition to their facility. Otter Tail Power had some office renovations and other improvements, and then the Head Start space had a remodel as well as a reutilization of some space in that. So seeing a lot of investment, both publicly, privately, and in different institutions throughout the community. Residentially, saw growth continuing in multifamily, 36 units permitted, which was the final phase of Sunset Ridge, which also included the Pioneer Road extension project, so the road to serve that facility. So that will be wrapping up here in 2018 to have those units completed and that project closed out. Single family did just have 7 units permitted, and we'll talk about that a little later as one of the priorities of the EIC, to think about what influence or support could be provided to that particular development area. The city became more active in blighted property removal, and was able to have 5 single family homes deeded over to the city, and 4 of them demolished. 2 lots have been sold to a developer for 2018 home builds, and then 1 rehab is underway. One of the other lots is for a parking expansion, and the other one is still is land banked for the time being. Gate City Bank brought forward a community investment program through the Neighborhood Impact Program funding, and through that process over the summer and fall, $265,000 of single-family owner-occupied renovations were funded. So always good to think about how we are reinvesting in that most significant portion of our infrastructure, which is our housing stock. That's the most valuable piece of infrastructure that we have. Well, it is privately owned. It is a component of our infrastructure as a city that needs to be looked at.
Amy, on that one, what's the timeline on that program? Was that a year program?
It closed in November.
Okay.
Yep, it was a period of time it was open. Certainly, we'd love to have that reopened, but
Sure.
yeah, there's that opportunity in the future. So all these projects resulted in a pretty dramatic increase in amount of permitted projects in the city. You'll see the last 5 years of permits, we were really around that 10, 12, 14 million, and last year we saw that bump up to 24 million in permitted value. So Very strong year, and numbers so far in just the first month and a half of 2018 show that we're going to likely have another very strong year between actual projects that have come in already or inquiries that have been made that expect 2018 projects. So looking forward to another really strong year.
Does that 24 million include the library?
It does, yep.
So from a property tax impact, then it's still only around that 10, 12 million.
The actual permit value for the library wasn't 9 million. That's the total project cost. Permitted, I don't think I have that number here, but it was probably about half that. So it is a large component, but doesn't make up that full $10 million spread. All right, so moving on to kind of review 6 strategic priorities that the EIC talked about at a session back in June of 2017, and had a good dialogue around what role could the EIC play, what role should the EIC play in some of these topics with their powers, or what they do or don't have for powers and resources. So I think some really good items were identified. One is to look for strategies to defer special assessments that are on the Progress Drive industrial lots that are owned by the Port Authority. And as a result of that discussion, there actually was a pay down of by 50% by Western Minnesota Industries. They owned the former Go Float building that I referenced with 59 Finishing, and so with the sale of that asset to 59 Finishing, they had some assets that they were looking to put towards industrial purposes, which has been their mission over time. So really pleased to have that. It was $162,000 that they committed to that 50% buy down, which aligns with other special assessments in industrial properties. We, as a community, historically had used federal economic development administration money to support industrial development and the infrastructure extensions. That wasn't the case with this subdivision. So they had 100% assessments on there, which is really limiting the ability of users to come in and develop. So with that, we have one project that's in the discussion phase. It hasn't progressed fully yet, but is a very interested party in looking at one of those projects. And without that buy down, they wouldn't have moved forward even in a discussion phase. I mentioned the single family housing, so looking to establish partnerships or relationships to improve single family development. And we are looking at a multi-organization representation team to be formed and to talk about what role could the EIC play, what role could or should the city play. It's a private market, and I will say, based on some meetings so far in 2018, I do feel confident that we'll see more single-family development coming forward, just based on the interest so far in the first month and a half of the year. That I think the market may be starting to correct itself in that, and having supply meet the demand in a better way that we haven't seen in the last few years. So hopefully those will come, but we'll continue to be having dialogue about what support we can provide around that particular development area. Increased marketing of available industrial sites, so both the Progress Drive shovel-ready certified sites as well as the other Port Authority owned industrial properties was the topic here, and we've been able to work through the state of Minnesota on the shovel-ready certification that we are now industry certified for light and small scale manufacturing and small food processing, and that's really driven by the type of infrastructure available, that we are served to the capacity that's needed to do like food processing, for instance, that our infrastructure and water systems can support that type of industry, as well as the size of the parcels. So they're relatively small in nature for those shovel-ready sites, so that's why they align well with those areas as well. There was an acreage requirement for some of those industry certifications. So we'll be able to use that as we move forward with additional marketing. And then there was a recommendation to the Port Authority by the EIC to secure brokerage services, and that RFP did go out in January, and we'll be looking for the Port Authority to consider that. The response is likely in March. So we'll continue discussion on that. Development of a business retention and expansion program, and so out of that, there were monthly visits initiated in the fall of 2017 with EIC board members along with staff. We've been to Bimbo Bakeries, Paydac Plastics, Shoretex Fabric, Vector Windows. The goal, or the initial focus was really on manufacturing and how do we support that industry and understand what their needs are. What could we as a community be doing different? What messages do we need to be bringing to other governing bodies, whether it's the state or federal level, of challenges that they're having in their growth? Again, the biggest thing we hear from them is workforce. How do we incent the automation if needed? So many programs are tied to job creation, not output or productivity. So it's just a continued dialogue both locally and at a state level as well. Looking at improving communication, I think that's always a good thing to look at. We've been providing more updates between staff and the board, between board meetings, making sure this meeting is taking place, that the different bodies are coming together, that industry is connecting better also with the board, and we've been working on that through the Business Retention Expansion Program as well. And finally, refocusing on an overall marketing and branding for Fergus Falls, and being for the community of Fergus Falls as we look to attract more residents to help with our workforce supply, as well as attracting businesses. If we're able to demonstrate that we have the quality of life, and which I believe we can, the quality of life for both workers and businesses, that we're providing the right environment, that how do we message that out? And that's the work with H2M that was initiated back in November, and the EIC continues to work on that topic as well.
Hi. I couldn't see if you saw me.
Yeah, yes.
I'm going to talk, I don't know if I can stay turned around,
No,
but
that's fine. You're to be talking to the board.
I'm wondering about the H2M contract and a little more information on what they are doing for us in what stages. Is that something we already have as a council, or is it something I can get from the board? And the reason I ask is we were invited by the person that holds the sign contract on the south side of Fergus, the billboard, to put ideas forth as to what could be on the sign. And I thought, what an opportune time to discuss with you all as EIC, if you're working with H2M, that would be a topic we could together be in on, what might market at this point, or even alert people to Fergus, and we'd all be of one mind on that. Does that make sense? The idea, I just like to wonder.
That was absolutely a tactic that we presented forward to H2M that is available. Mm-hmm. And we don't have any visualization yet. We expect in March for the EIC to receive that initial concept of the visual of what this would look like and some of the key messaging points. They're on track for that. We certainly can talk about where we're at. The EIC is really looking forward to being that community umbrella of how the community is portrayed from a lowercase c. I guess we had some discussion on this versus this capital C as the city as an organization. So there's kind of a two-tracked program now with H2M. One is that broader community messaging and branding that the EIC is focusing on. And then there's also an internal communications plan for the city of Fergus Falls as an organization, and how do we message out the messages that the city needs to be messaging as an organization.
Right. The question then for me is focused on the timeline of our sign, when that would be up. Like the message would be.
I'm going to defer to Guy. He's been the primary contact for that.
Usually July, August, September, he gives us, by contract, we're given 3 months of time on the sign for free for him having the sign located on city property.
Right.
Yeah, it's usually July, August, September. Yeah. And we've been splitting it. I don't know if they know the history between EIC, Visit Fergus Falls, and then just any other city message that we would put out there.
Right.
So one year we had a message on the golf course. Gene Bowman's had a few up there, and then I think you've had it 2 years?
We did Live Wide Open, partnership with West Central Initiative 2 years ago. Last year was the CBB.
Right, and my interest is that the council gets a chance with this board to work on that message, and the timeline is something we have a chance to consider it before it is, you know, actually hatched and out there, whatever. So we could have a meeting perhaps about this and get updated before, when you're getting close to that, you know, conceptual idea or whatever. I've had people from the community approach, you know, a little bit about what messaging, and we haven't had that full discussion yet, I don't think, as a council, but it would be nice to have input. So, thanks. Sounds good.
All right, so any other questions on those strategic priorities? Otherwise, move on to projects and initiatives that are both EIC-led and city-led, but they, again, tend to merge together a little bit given the nature of the work that we do. All right, so workforce remains to be the top priority of the EIC. It wasn't it was identified the last 2 years prior, but we have a number of efforts underway now. So more than it's kind of just part of our work now. So it didn't need to be identified as a strategic priority because it is just ongoing work that we do to support the workforce, the skills, the right skills, the amount of people, the all the areas around workforce that we need to. The Otter Tail County Rural Rebound Initiative formally launched in 2017 after fundraising and coordination on that took place in 2016. So the staff person came on board as the coordinator of the initiative in January 2017, and the EIC is a funder of that initiative as well as assisting with advising on different ideas and efforts that are coming out of there. I listed a few of them there, and I want to show one video, if I could, that is called Made in the OTC, and it's a new, one of the newer initiatives out of the Rural Rebound effort that started with a Fergus Falls company.
So as I'm tapping these in, I'm also using my fingers to make sure that they're straight. Last spot, we drop the bell in. The crew gets going pretty fast on them when they get moving. This will be the final product that they take. They'll run it through on the drill press. That's the sander where I was saying that they break down the corner on it. They just take it and go right around. And all it does is to break down the corner so your line doesn't get caught on the edges. My crew comes up with some pretty creative stuff to streamline our processes. We do build a lot of rattle reels. Instead of us doing the store-to-store now, we're doing more distribution centers, distribution everything, where they're ordering pallets instead of cases. This one is our most popular. This thing here sells like crazy. It's the wall mount, but it's a swing out, so it's got the hinge on it. We also have it as a removable pin that you can squeeze off, pull the pin. They put these all over your fish house so you can move your rattle reel throughout the time. We have both styles. We have the pin and we have the non-pin. Both sell the same. They're the same rattle reel. We have to mount each one where we take a drill, go through, pre-drill all the holes. Oak gets dry, tends to crack if we don't. We do a lot of winter fishing products. We do around 8-10 different products from our dipper to our slush inhaler that we sell. So this is just one aspect of our winter fishing. This is just one part of it. We are always building. I'll be building rattle reels all summer long. In June, I'll be making slush inhalers ready to go. I have a feeling we're going to pick up here shortly, and we're going to be moving. So I have my crew building behind me. As you can see, we've got piles and boxes ready to go.
So that's just one example of how they're promoting out what's happening in, there we go. Some of the cool things that are happening in Otter Tail County, that one focused in Fergus Falls, and to highlight the area. So bringing awareness to the area, and then meet the locals. I won't show that video, but it's another feature that's been pushed out through social media. I'll add that Made in the OTC video had 25,000 views. So very widespread reach on that, and really positive connection back to both the nature of our area with the ice fishing, tying it to the seasonality, and then that there's cool things. And if you saw in the narrative of the video, they help people bring their ideas to life. So if you have the idea for the next rattle reel or slush thing, I can't remember the name, but they also make the really cool rain gauges there, the official National Weather Service rain gauges. So it's not seasonally appropriate right now, but just bringing awareness that they, what services they provide. So again, if you have your next idea, they'll help you bring it to market. So just to note that, that's something that not a lot of people know about productive alternatives. Meet the Locals is a feature of people who have who live here, who have come here, who have are from here and have come back. Why people live here. So selling that quality of life. And the one I have linked here is a Pioneer Care employee and actually wife of the Wash and Go car wash project. So just it all comes full circle, entrepreneurs and bringing workforce in. So again, telling people the type of quality of life. Talking about why people live here, which is really what matters. Job of the Week is an ongoing feature. It was promoted a little more during the summer when some of our seasonal visitors were around, and I have a screenshot of that one with Northern Contours that was highlighted here locally. And again, just people may not know of the opportunities, and there's been a variety of features throughout to, again, raise awareness, get the reach out there. The number of impressions through the social media efforts in the first year of the Rural Rebound Initiative have been really phenomenal, talking in the millions of reaches to people. So raising awareness is a big piece of what we're doing here around workforce. And then finally, the Grab a Bite. That's when people have come here. How do we support them in integrating into the community? And that was an idea that came out of the 2017 Blandon cohort training that went to the community leadership program through Blandon, and it was one of the ideas that came out of that, and it's now been rolled out on a county-wide basis. So, meetings are happening ongoing with volunteers in the community who meet with newcomers to connect them better in the community, help be just a contact point and be a reference of what is there to do, how do we make sure these people are connected and stay, because getting them to come here is a lot of work and effort, and if we're not supporting them once they get here, that would be really a shame. So excited to see that program come off the ground and really be from a grassroots effort, and now, like I said, expanded throughout the county. We have our existing workers that we want to make sure our businesses are supported in training offerings to make sure their skills are up to speed and that they're able to grow and progress with their employment. So we launched the Small Business Training Series in partnership with M-State and the Chamber of Commerce with funding from West Central Initiative. The business survey that the EIC completed in late 2017 or 2016 was used to identify what offerings are going to be put out there. And there was a January 2018 launch for the year for that various trainings that will be offered at low or no cost to our existing employees in the community. Certainly a discussion around workforce would not be complete without childcare being talked about. And the EIC has been a strong supporter of figuring out solutions. There isn't a single solution. It certainly is a multi-pronged solution as we work towards the challenges around the availability and cost from the accessibility standpoint of childcare. In March, we hosted a community meeting with United Way that brought First Children's Finance, a nonprofit who works in the world of child care development, and had a a great meeting at capacity. You know, it was a countywide discussion, but out of that locally, two big takeaways was a request to convene healthcare employers who have some specific challenges around childcare with shifts, part-time workers, on-call, different needs, and they've been meeting now. You know, they haven't really found a driving factor to rally around a solution yet, but they've surveyed their employees to understand what the needs are and are working to really align those needs with what could they do as an employer to support that. And then also wrote a small grant application through Blandon Foundation to help Children's Corner, our existing child care center, look at some operational analysis. They currently have 3 locations within Fergus Falls, and First Children's Finance helped them analyze those 3 locations from costs and, you know, understanding where their money is going. How could a single location provide efficiencies from staffing, supplies, mostly staffing, that's the big cost that they have, and then be able to serve more children. And then the other part of their work funded by Blandon was to do a site plan for a combined facility. So they do have a building footprint that would show how could they come together, and are using that through some various discussions. But a big investment for them to think about, and, you know, trying to support them in the decision that they made and leverage that asset that we have here in Fergus Falls already. Another piece that we heard from the community is to help our in-home providers be more efficient in their business and help them stay in business longer. So we brought in a national speaker on the business side of childcare, and we had around 90 people attend that training here in Fergus Falls through community education, and we were a financial sponsor bringing that training to the community. And then finally, there is a gap analysis underway that looks at that market with First Children's Finance doing the work of our surrounding area, including Fergus Falls, on what is that number? What's the number that isn't being met today or is being met through unlicensed or friends and family or other offerings? So we'll have that from a data standpoint to jump off of hopefully by the end of this month. The Employability Initiative started as a really conceptual discussion about a year ago with United Way, M-State, and then ultimately Mahabiatwa Community Action Partnership came on board. And that is a project to train unemployed and underemployed people in our high-demand, higher-paying positions throughout the county. Area employers also became very engaged in this discussion, and we're working off a model that United Way has seen in other communities. So not creating something new, but building off and learning from what other communities have done. And this has paid off. We've been able to secure funding for Mahabiatwa to hire a new type of case manager to support people in those populations. Focusing on healthcare is the first career track that will be providing training through really concentrated support here this year, and then moving into manufacturing and commercial driving is the other CDL licensure, would be the other 2 topics that we hope to move into as we go forward with that effort. And there was a number of plans and studies either initiated or concluded in 2017. The largest one certainly being the Downtown and Riverfront Master Plan that was approved by the City Council in December. That outlines the community vision and guiding principles for the study area, looks at public infrastructure and improvements as well as opportunity sites, and finally establishes an implementation plan to support the broader execution of the ideas within the plan. And then in conjunction, somewhat overlaid, is the Glacial Edge Master Plan that was completed in June and then subsequently approved by the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission in late 2017. And this approval opens up legacy funds to help with the implementation of that 14-mile trail with a key segment of it coming through the downtown along the river. We also continued work on the Hoot Lake Power Plant closure study that was funded by a grant in late 2016 that was awarded through the Federal Economic Development Administration with matching money from Otter Tail Power, Otter Tail County, the city, and the EIC. And there was 3 primary work areas that were to be completed through that study. Preliminary engineering, which is in draft report now, and then a land use consultant was selected at the end of 2017 and kicked off looking at future land use when the conditions change at that study area. And the final area that we'll be working on in 2018 is the financial analysis and looking at the impact of that closure and how do we long-term mitigate it as well as short-term manage the change in our tax capacity that will result from that closure. And then finally, a family aquatic feasibility study, kind of going back to that quality of life and how do we support desires of the community. A study was initiated through the City Council in February 2017, and a committee recommendation came forward in late 17 for an outdoor family facility at Kirkbride Park. And there'll be continued discussion taking place with that from the committee coming forward in late February. So another key area that we're looking to improve on, but that we do now in some level, is marketing and communications. We do a number of print pieces, so our Focus on Business is a relatively new newsletter that we do twice a year in print, twice a year through a MailChimp distribution system, and that goes out in mail form to all of our commercial addresses that we have within our records, and then emailed out to our database and through social media as we're able to, but definitely looking to improve on that, both from a format standpoint and how we distribute it. So excited to work with H2M on that. We were a sponsor in the Otter Tail Fergus Falls Visitor Guide with an ad that looked at, again, as we're trying to attract people to know that this is a great place to live, not just to vacation. It's kind of the key messaging around that. We advertise with Tri-State Manufacturing and our event sponsors when they host different pieces in Fergus Falls and other places. We've published in the Daily Journal's Progress and Innovation publications. Thriving in the North, which was a joint ad that you'll see on the right side of the screen. Again, looking at that live, work, play concept in partnership with West Central Initiative and their Live Wide Open efforts, and Otter Tail County. This was a national publication for the state of Minnesota, and we had a full page ad in that goes out broadly across the country with the Department of Employment and Economic Development. And then finally, the Real Estate Journal, in conjunction with the summit that I'll talk about in just a moment that we hosted. We also had a full page ad in that publication, and we will be able to, we have 2 more ads that we have credit for that we're waiting to utilize H2M and some of the new messaging around. So we'll have that already paid for and be able to utilize coming forward. All right, we also participate in a number of events, either hosting or co-hosting with other organizations. The State of the City was very well received last year with great attendance. We'll be looking forward to that event again in April with the Chamber of Commerce and Visit Fergus Falls. Small Business Appreciation Breakfast that we hold in conjunction with National Small Business Week in May, and we'll be planning to host that sold-out event. We've been at capacity for that event the last couple of years, so look forward to recognizing our small businesses again. Hosted something in the lobby, Chamber Cafe, through the Chamber of Commerce for the first time. That was a fun event in the morning. To have that many people active in City Hall was really fun. A lot of folks who'd never stepped foot in City Hall, so it was a great exposure for the city to be part of that. The Micropolitan.
Are you implying that people in City Hall aren't active?
What's that?
I said, are you implying people in City Hall aren't active?
Oh, well, when there's 80 people in the lobby, that's more than a typical day. The Micropolitan Summit that we hosted in September was well received by various members of the development community. That was in partnership with Real Estate Journal, Real Estate Communications, statewide organization, and again, really received some good exposure that was new to a number of the attendees, and information shared there. Strong partner in the High School Career Exploration Day. Ryan on our staff serves as the coordinator for the gym activities, the exhibitors there, and then I support coordinating the student visits out to different employers that day. So trying to continue to revamp that to be more effective and more meaningful for the students so that they understand the career opportunities here in Fergus Falls, even if they do go someplace else for a period of time, whether education or initial jobs, but to know that we have employers and understand what the employers do, because so many of our jobs are behind doors that you don't know what they do unless you've had that exposure at some point of your life. So really trying to work to get more students into employers to understand the opportunities that we have here. And finally, Minnesota Manufacturing Week. This year we partnered with Northern Contours to promote their 25th anniversary of operations. They had a great open house and tours of their facility. That's in October annually with the state of Minnesota as well. And finally, just some general outreach. So the EIC is a sponsor of a number of activities in the community to help make them possible. Frostbite Festival, the Chamber of Commerce Golf Scramble, and this year Otter Tail County Art Impact Study that was recently released, I think in the last week or two. That data came out, so we're happy to be part of that because certainly Fergus Falls is a large beneficiary of the impact of the arts. The 2016 data that came out specific to Fergus Falls showed over $3 million impact of the arts, and the Otter Tail County-wide study showed an impact of just less than $7 million, if I remember the numbers correctly. So Fergus Falls really is the hub of the impact of the arts within our county, so really looking to leverage that as we're able to going forward. The Business Exchange and Job Fair, we had a booth there to, again, promote what we have going on, job opportunities at the time within the city, as well as just the work that's happening with the library project and different other efforts were talked about at that event, and then different speaking events on a statewide level. I was a speaker at the Economic Development Association conference talking about one of our housing projects, River Oaks Landing, how we identified that need and worked through a successful project there. Enterprise Minnesota, I spoke at their regional release on the annual State of Manufacturing, and again talking about how we're trying to engage and support the workers for our manufacturers as we go forward. And then just certainly numerous other various community meetings that we get out and talk to share the word about what's going on. All right, and then finally Forward Fergus Falls had their annual celebration and planning for the future back in August. And that brought together people from throughout the community to think about how could the community come together and create drivers for our future. What do we want to be moving towards as a community, and a number of areas around family recreation and certainly just continued work around healthy business and workforce environment, leadership, and then looking at our downtown and riverfront as well. So that group meets monthly, and that's open to everybody to attend. Currently the meetings are the first Friday of the month at Cooper's upstairs. Some data, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail. I'll be handing out the actual report that you can dive into and analyze and think about further, but I'll just kind of go through these fairly quickly. One of our key data sets actually isn't available yet. There's an overall property tax report that generally comes out by the end of the year. And this year, it utilizes data from the Minnesota Department of Revenue, and this report has been delayed because I'm reading this, Department of Revenue is going through a significant transition to a new database, and there's been some issues. So
Kind of like the licensing.
Right, I know, I'm seeing a trend here at the state, so, yeah. So I'll just highlight some of these, but you know, as soon as that data comes out, it's tied to our overall tax rates that we don't have total data for as comparison, and with our peer communities, or the amount of tax increment financing, the tax capacity that's captured in tax increment financing districts, which is a really, I think, a really important data point. So we'll continue to monitor when that comes available. But to start here, the total tax capacity in Fergus Falls continues to go up, and that's an important piece as we look at our overall tax base and the tax burden on our residents. So that's a great number that we like to see continuing to increase. And this is total tax capacity with some of our peer communities. And this does get equalized with local government aid. And so that's one piece of data that we don't have available to show that chart to show how it equalizes out, but you can see the differences in peer communities on an overall community basis, and then on a per capita basis as well. This is an indicator of average wealth within the community in a way, but again, back to that, thinking about wealth as a property value perspective. This is the one where we don't have the 2017 data, but just to remind that we'll be looking at this, the percent of tax capacity that's captured in TIF as soon as that data comes out, because we have had some new districts come online in Fergus Falls. We'll want to continue to monitor this number. A good rule of thumb is staying below the 10% number, so you're not overburdening the general taxpayers with properties captured in districts. So we'll,
Amy, I'm sorry,
yeah.
could you go over that just a little, just maybe just one more layer?
Sure.
So it's the percentage of property tax that's captured in TIF zones? Or
in
currently
districts.
in TIF projects?
Mhm. In you take the properties that are in tax increment financing districts whose are being captured in TIF revenues.
Sure.
And then looking at that as a percentage of your total tax capacity. So it's a calculation of total, so Alexandria's, in 2016 was about 6%. We were less than 1% in 2016. So what that shows is a very little portion of our development is captured in tax increment financing districts. But we have had new districts come on, so these numbers are going to shift with the new projects that we've had with Aura Fabricators. This may not even include Sunset Ridge Apartments off Western, and then also the Unique Opportunities Legacy project.
And what did you say that the rule of thumb is? You
Well,
want to stay
below 10%. If you start approaching that 10% and you're pretty aggressively, not saying you can't, but
Sure.
it would be, it's just a policy. It could be a policy consideration that you wouldn't want to approve any new districts until one of them comes off. If you want to stay around that 10% range, it could be a consideration for the city council to think about as a metric for approving new districts.
Did you have a slide on the split between commercial, like housing and industrial?
The breakdown,
Yeah.
I don't. I believe that is one of those percentages that we don't, that we weren't able to get. I can double check though. I mean, we have last year's data.
But is what you're asking is of the 950 in Alexandria, what percentage is housing versus
Oh.
what percentage is industrial?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, we don't have that level of detail. What we have is your tax capacity that's in those different categories. I have not seen TIF captured tax capacity at that level of detail.
Would it be possible to
We could get ours. We could do ours,
It'd be
yeah.
interesting to see like these communities that are really using TIF strong, like Alexandria and Bemidji.
What
or
type of
Marshall.
projects?
What percentage of that is housing versus what percentage is industrial?
We could certainly call, I mean,
If-
there's,
if-
yeah, even if we want to do just a couple, we can call the communities and ask them, certainly. Yeah. Just making a note. So the three categories for TIF, not to get into too much, are manufacturing or economic development districts, which is what Aura Fabricators would be. There's housing districts, which would be like Sunset Ridge and Legacy Apartments, and then there's redevelopment districts. There's one other one that's a renewal and renovation, but it's very limited use for that one. But yeah, we'll definitely pull that, especially when that other data comes out. We'll have that breakdown as well. And then just one final slide, and looking at employment trends, or sorry, there's two more slides. The total employment, not a big shift here. Just the one to note is, the weekly wage totals rising consistently. So that's good for our residents and workers here. These are for all workers in town. We have 10,000 plus workers. About 5,000 of those live in our community. So we export some and then we import some jobs as well.
What are the establishment totals?
It's a really variable number. I guess, it is a tracked number. They do look at home filing, so seeing the number drop doesn't surprise me. We've had a lot of, if someone incorporates or establishes an LLC, all of those count in establishments. So it's not it's a metric, but I would say the employment and the wage are the two important numbers on that screen. All right, promise, last screen, last slide. And this is another good one. So we've been really trying to push out our loan programs more in the last year or two, and I think we saw some good traction this year. We had 18 loans this year between the city and the EIC, and for a total of over $500,000. We did have another loan for $250 that was approved by the city, but didn't close until 2018, January 3rd, I think it closed. So had that number been in there, we would have been, close to that $800,000 number. So, it's great to see the money that we have in use in the community and supporting businesses in their growth and endeavors. So, we still have capacity to do additional lending, and we are really looking for more opportunity to get those dollars in use in the community and support the increase of that tax capacity. And just to highlight some of the loans, we participated in the Smith & Sem project, the Salon True project. Aura Fabricators did get a direct loan from West Central Initiative. We didn't participate in that. West Central had a better rate and process, so they did take advantage of that loan pool. A number of the wash and go, so really, many of the new builds involved funding from the city and or the EIC. So happy to answer any questions on that, but that is it. So I would encourage a dialogue amongst the two bodies and thinking about digesting some of this information, or how, as Chairman Olson indicated, how can the two groups be aligned and work together on furthering the development of these efforts.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that sticks out to me is I have an economic development background. My first job out of college was the Governor's Office of Economic Development in South Dakota. Back then it was jobs, 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 how many jobs did you create, and everybody's trying to hang their hat on it. And it's such a more complex issue now that you see what Amy presented and what we're involved in. It's not just how many jobs do we create, but you got to deal with the housing to draw people, the child care, if you do get them here, for someone to take care. Quality of life, it all is a component of this economic development, not just how many jobs you create. So as you look at all the things that we've been involved in, I think some key things did come out. We did a business survey last year, and although it was rather glowing for the city, there were some recommendations about staff training. We implemented that last year. Amy was involved in that. Having a voice directly to the city, so the BRE program, getting out and giving those business owners a voice and see what their issues are, how we can help, and we're starting to pull together some of those responses to see if there's ways that the EIC can be involved and the city can be involved. So a lot of things going on, but where can we do more?
Dad, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
As we look at it, as the position has switched from an independent employment to now the city is, I think, Amy's employed by the city, and the EIC board continues to function as it did previously. Questions I've had are, how do we represent from the city side the board, so that we represent the shift in the way the employment is carried out, or the way that you could say reporting comes and how it's all measured. And that's that's just a structural question based on a government unit, taking on employee and shifting from a private enterprise. I don't think that's clear to me yet how that might, we might, if that needs adjustment, if there's how we measure that or get reports. The second thing I had, I guess, from this specific is, from a business standpoint, measuring investment to return on the many areas that you're doing that are all very good, I'm sure, but how do you measure investment to return on what you've done this year with these many different projects, so that you might direct and focus the efforts that would be more profitable or give greater returns to the community in terms of your mission statement? So sort of a bigger question of how you measure that. Is that fair? You understand what I'm saying? How do you, as a board, measure that investment to return on all these different areas that you're involved in?
That's a good question. And I think everyone grapples with that challenge.
Right.
There's no direct cause and effect, I don't believe, to measure, but Amy has ideas through her experience.
And a lot of this is long-term. It could be years before you actually get the true result of, like, the childcare. It was an issue back when my daughter was born, 26 years ago, and we're still dealing with it and trying to get better solutions. Children's Corner was really small, and they only took kids that were potty trained up through kindergarten, I believe, at that time. Now look at what we've got, 3 different buildings going. So a lot of that isn't where you're gonna do an investment and have a return immediate. But again, I'm new to all this.
Right,
so-
I just refer back to your mission statement probably, and say you have 3 areas there that I understand, maybe we could you throw that up again for us? And so I was looking at those 3 areas and I was thinking, new businesses, right, retention, and then wasn't it the health of the business?
Quality.
Quality, yeah.
Quality of life.
So, and my question relates to that, so if you took those 3 areas and you said, how could we, work together with all of us, to be able to measure so we know that the efforts we're putting in, our investment to return in these areas will give back to those 3 main, purposes in the mission statement. From a nonprofit board standpoint, I've worked on those, more, but I would say that, establishing certain goals, 1, 3, and 5 year out of that are measurable, is the only way to begin looking at investment to return results. That the board helps with, everyone helps to establish certain criteria by which we might measure. I know you can't measure everything, and but I do believe that we have to have some targets in anything to be able to say that this activity, like childcare, pays off, in some kind of growth, result, retention, or a new business. And that's really my question, is how can we be efficient with our taxpayer dollars, showing some return to these areas that you've identified as a mission statement? Is that fair enough? And I'd love to see us work so we understand that, so we understand your work as a board and, and how Amy functions.
Yeah, just add one piece on that, the measurement. We've tried to get some of the baseline information. The survey was mentioned, that was done, and that's one piece that we would look at repeating, so we can see perception measurements. How are people feeling about how they do business here? That's one way to measure. We want to give it some time to we'd want to continue that analysis. Maybe it's in 5-year increments, 4-year, whatever seems appropriate. But surveying is one of those that the board has talked about continuing that survey in an ongoing basis. So that would be one area that could be a specific measure point over time to look at conditions within the community.
I think some of them are intangible and some of them more tangible. So I think you'd have to kind of start separating out some of those. As Chad said, obviously, you could, if you took childcare, for example, you could say, well, there's X places for childcare today, so, it's our goal in 5 years to double that, if you want. But, some of them are obviously hopefully feel-good factors to get people to come to Fergus. But I think we're trying to promote, obviously, activity around the businesses as much there are in Fergus, as opposed to seeking new ones. And maybe that's something that ultimately we have to look at, as to how do we attract new ones. But then it's a chicken and egg, because you talk to a number of businesses in town, and they can have employees that want to come and work in Fergus, but then choose to live somewhere else because they can't find a house. And the housing piece is as much as an impact for people to move to Fergus as childcare or kind of I visited one manufacturer who is an executive position, and that person's actually going to live in Alex, because they couldn't find, you know, a house in Fergus. And Alex has more amenities than Fergus. So it's a high-paying job, but it's not gonna be in Fergus. You know, they're not gonna spend it. He's gonna earn his money in Fergus, and he's gonna take it and spend it in Alex.
Right. Yeah, I do think there are measurables and there are intangibles. I don't debate that. I
Yeah.
think all I'm saying is, from a standpoint of how we view the success of this, that there are certain things that can be measured, and to identify those, so that in the report we can see that we created one new business, whatever, something, or we created so many positions in childcare, or we created a housing development that allow our doctors to say, we will live in Fergus Falls because we do have a housing development we can build a home in that we feel comfortable with. I think that's a real example I've just heard. So I'm just looking for specifying the areas we can to have a certain rubric of measurement to say, this investment yields or yielded this certain result. Not everything, obviously, because there's so much in the report, you know, the Minnesota Trail, you know, which is part of what you're doing, but wasn't really an EIC project initiated by the EIC, et cetera. But the things that you really can get a handle on, childcare is one, I'm sure you've heard that. I'd love to see us work towards some measurement rubrics, or at least investment to return. These things pay off. And this is how, you know, some specifics. And I'm getting that, and I'm saying that also from people in the community, saying, okay, well, how do we know what's happening exactly? You know, what are, and I know you can't measure everything. That's a given. So, just a suggestion.
Well, I think it's a great idea. The challenge is measuring it, and then how do you get, anecdotally, some of it's gonna be credited to the EIC. For example, if a business comes in, and that's what we're measuring, is number of businesses. New business starts up. Do you take credit on your report because a new business, there's one more tally? You know, some of it becomes anecdotal. Because we were doing this work, we feel that this business came in, and that's the perennial challenge of measuring economic development, is it's hard to make a cause and effect line directly between the two items.
No doubt, I totally agree with you. That, yeah. However, I don't think it's impossible to create, you know, more goal-specific measurement. That's all I'm saying. So that's my suggestion, encouragement, whatever, that we can do that together. Since it is taxpayer money that is helping to fund this, we also have to be able to say, this is what we're producing. And we can answer that question when someone from downtown or someone says, what parts are, you know, happening, really cooking with this, so.
Sure.
Well, I know specifically, the company I work for definitely benefited, and it was a big thing. Our first call was to Amy and Gordon Hajdukovic. What can be done to help us acquire the building next door? Which gave us another, 13,000 square feet of floor space, plus the outdoor fenced-in area. And it's full. And it's full. And, you know, we're able to produce more, we have more people, solely because of that. So that would be a measurable item right there,
Yeah.
so.
Right, and those come into the loans, you know,
That was through the loan fund that we got a loan,
in that particular instance.
helped with the interest rate.
I think update meetings like this help too. Just
Definitely.
seeing some of the progression and some of the numbers.
I have a question, not to get into the details, but that Minnesota Western, whoever bought down those assessments out on, explain that to me a little. Who is behind that? Is that more detail than we need to know?
Yeah, they're so they were established back in the 80s, and it was in support of industrial development. So they were kind of a holding company. They're a nonprofit.
Is it a local, is it a statewide, or is it, they have
It's
local?
It's local.
And it was formed locally?
Formed locally.
From a statewide movement? But there's, around, there's?
No, it's local.
Just local, okay.
Just local.
And what is the name again?
Western Minnesota Industries.
Western Minnesota, okay.
And so they, over time, had owned many, or part of the development of many of the industrial properties that we have today.
Okay.
West Tool and Design, they were affiliated with that. So they would hold it during the tax increment financing period, and we're kind of a pass-through,
In the 80s, did you say?
80s to 90s, and then,
It's kind of almost like an initial port authority.
Yeah. It makes sense now.
Yeah.
First I was like.
so their last asset was
Was
a
Go
contract
Float?
for deed with the Go Float, and so they didn't, until they sold that, they didn't have really any assets. They had a building asset that they had hoped
Yep.
would flourish, but, and the board just said they really, they don't wish to, their role is no longer valid, and there was a just determination that the structure doesn't work
Sure.
anymore from a state auditor's perspective. So, so they're really looking just, how can they support their mission of supporting industrial growth, and they felt that interest buy-down was appropriate in their mission.
That makes
Okay.
perfect sense.
And I think those particular lots, they're so heavily burdened with assessments that nobody's ever going to, I mean, anybody that comes to the city and wants to, do something on those lots, they're gonna ask for either some relief or something on them. So this at least gets them to be in the ballpark of being,
And those are some of the shovel-ready sites
Yep.
too, right?
yeah,
Correct.
That we
up by
talked about.
Quality
Yeah.
Circuits and,
So it's important that they're
Behind
not only
Comstock.
shovel-ready, they're actually
yeah.
financially
I mean,
viable.
Right.
that's it, they were shovel-ready, but financially they were so burdened
Right.
with assessments.
Okay, thank you.
Nice step.
Jim?
Amy, was that the group that was made up of the banks and Otter Tail Power and Great Plains Natural Gas?
It did initially start that way. Now the representation is quite mixed. Who's been on the board now? It's
Okay, so that originally was that group though?
it morphed, yep, yeah.
Thank you.
But that was the inception. Yeah, thank you for that history.
One more clarify.
Sorry.
It's a
Yeah.
joint, it's a joint meeting,
Oh,
so,
yeah.
you could.
Go ahead, Ron.
Port Authority, in my history of, looking back, just trying to remember, Port Authority at one point had a robust involvement, I would say, in Fergus Falls, development, et cetera. There's been a shift in some of the way the Port Authority is viewed and used. And I'm wondering if the board, EIC board, has any comment on the use of the Port Authority and how it might be used at times to do things that the city can't necessarily do the same way as the Port Authority. Because it used to be composed of many business people and others, and then it shifted under the council largely, made up council members. So, and I think that question has been raised to me, so I'm just raising it from the public side. How do you view your relationship to the Port Authority, kind of in a historical sense, and what could it be used for? Are there things it could be used for that would help our business, your business development efforts that may or may not be used now? It's sort of a function question. How is it functioning, and is it healthy? Is it doing what it's supposed to be doing, the Port Authority? I mean, it's not probably your question totally. I mean, it's a joint question. I'd like to discuss it sometime as a board. Pardon?
Since it's softball, anybody can swing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just.
I mean, my feeling. I mean, I think ultimately that that the Port Authority, the EIC, and even the business development one, there should be more collaboration and reduction, rather than having three boards that have somewhat a finger in, similar pies, to streamline it. I think hopefully that's one of the initiatives of kind of reducing some of the committees, so we get more functional boards and committees, rather than dissemination.
It's a good topic for conversation though, because I think that the Port Authority is probably, we could all agree that it's underutilized of what it could, so I think it's, we're gonna get the room put back together. If anyone has any parting comments, Mr. Chair?
No, I don't have any. I appreciate everyone making it tonight. Opening the dialogue.
See you next year.
See you next year.
Thanks, Dad. Carl, thanks.
Thank you.